صلى الله على آله وصحبه ومن والاه. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He allows us to be a beneficial gathering. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that sends His peace and salutations upon our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his family, his companions, and those who came after him. Allahumma ameen. Um, it is 7:30 exactly on the dot, which is good. What time is Maghrib here? 8:55. I will do my best to finish within 60 minutes to give a lot of content, and then I'll leave the rest for Q&A. So there's going to be a lot of information here. So if you are someone who wants to take a picture of the slide or write notes down, you can, but there's going to be a lot of information. And so by the end of it, people always say, okay, I have so much and I don't know what to do with it. So just keep that in mind. If you have a question, I would jot it down because you might forget it. I'm okay with questions in between, but it's just easier for me to go through it once. This is called Roommates to Soulmates. I was at the ICNA convention this 2 weekends ago in Baltimore, and people kept turning their heads towards this. Roommates to Soulmates? And everyone has a different interpretation of roommates to soulmates. One auntie came up and said, Astaghfirullah, Muslims are staying together and they're not married yet. And, I even had some like college roommates coming up. They're like, is this for us? And I was like, no, not for you either. So, so there's a lot of interpretations, but it's definitely a head turner. And the point of roommates to soulmates, the idea is that two people get married and they live together. They're married under the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But things happen and the relationship kind of dulls, and they're living together as if they're roommates and they kind of lost that connection. But this whole workshop was not just for people who are married, it's also for people who are looking. It applies to everyone in different ways. It's a generic workshop. There are other workshops I've delivered over the past that are more specific, but this is my generic workshop. It's called Sakina Mawadda Rahma from Principle to Practice. So the next slide here, if you are someone who wants to, sometimes there's always new developments, new things I'm researching. And so if you want to be kept up to date, some of the things that I'm doing, you can do that there. You can also go to our website, roommatestosoulmates.com. It's roommates with two N's. The number two, soulmates.com. If you go there, you can also, there's a free assessment that you can take on there. It's a 45-minute assessment you can do whether you're single or whether you're married, and it'll give you a report as well. So you can go on our website. It's again roommates to soulmates on the bottom right of the slides. You should see that. Um, yeah, if you go to the next slide here, also I'm going to just to quickly talk about one of my other projects. So every decade I've been dedicating myself to solving one problem. In my 20s, I was dedicated towards solving the Arabic problem, so especially teaching Arabic. We have another program called Arabic Daily. If you have a high schooler who wants foreign language credit in any school in the United States, we're able to provide that, and also for adults. And we have a cohort starting in September, so you can also learn more there, inshallah. We go to the next slide here. All right, so this here is the framework that I've developed. It comes from the ayat of Quran, and أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون. This ayah is a very important ayah because it demonstrates the values. And I just want to preface this. I was debating which khutbah to give today, the values based with Sudan San, and I went with Sudan San, but I think the values one is also very important because um, one of the things that we have to shift from, so the number one question I get from anyone usually is, what are the rights of a husband and wife? Okay. People are like, okay, we're going to learn what the rights of a husband and wife are. But let me ask you a rhetorical question. which is if someone comes to me and I have a husband saying, brother, you have to tell my wife what the rights of a husband are. And I have a wife come to me and say, brother, you have to tell my husband what the rights of a wife are. And I tell them that. Do you think me telling them that will help their situation? And I just want you to think for a second. If I actually tell them what the rights of a husband and wife are, does that change anything in the marriage? Will that do anything for the couple? And the answer is most of the time, no. So then, what is the purpose of knowing the rights of a husband and the rights of a wife? Well, I think we have to first understand the general framework of Islam. You know, the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, إِنَّ الْحَلَالَ بَيِّنٌ وَإِنَّ الْحَرَامَ بَيِّنٌ وَبَيْنُهُمَا أُمُورٌ مُشْتَبِهَاتٌ لَا يَعْلَمُهُنَّ كَثِيرٌ مِنَ النَّاسِ. The halal things are clear, and the haram things are clear, just like the rights are clear. But between the two matters are doubtful matters or things that are ambiguous, vague, which most people don't know how to approach. They don't know what to do. فَمَنِ اتَّقَى الشُّبَهَاتِ, right? But the Prophet ﷺ gave the solution. Whoever has taqwa will know how to handle these situations. What is the Prophet ﷺ teaching us here? It's a very important usul he's teaching us. Is that we can't answer everything in our lives through a fiqh answer. I had a couple. Uh, the husband is Egyptian and the wife, she's a white convert, and she had a dog. Okay. And he's like, why do we have a dog? Well, she's like, the Maliki school says XYZ. And he's like, well, so you know, you can pick fiqh and do all these different things. But the Prophet ﷺ is saying, you don't go down the fiqh road. Don't go down that road. You go down the road of values. You use a values-based approach to solve problems and to grow, right? And that is exactly what this ayah of the Quran does. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not mentioning the most important verse of the Quran of marriage is, and from among his signs is that he created spouses from you so that what? So that you bring three values. If the hukuk and the rights of a husband and wife were so important, and the first thing we should talk about, wouldn't you think that those very details would have been explicit in some verses? I'm not saying there are not rights in a husband and wife. I'm just saying that's not always the first approach. The reason why we have rights for a husband and wife is to act as a baseline to prevent mismanagement, to prevent someone being put in a compromised situation, and to prevent the marriage becoming destructive. But once you get to that point, someone's stepping in, a third party, a sheikh, an imam, a lawyer, and they're forcing the other party to do something. But at that point, we're just resuscitating the marriage. We're just acting as an ambulance, resuscitating. And you're alive. Yes, you are alive. You are surviving, but are you thriving? So the way to grow a marriage is not through knowing the rights of a husband and wife. The way to grow a marriage is to grow through the values Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in this verse. This is the core here. And the three values he mentioned is sakina, tranquility, mawadda, love, and rahma, mercy. So this is the focus of the framework, is how do you grow it, not how do you prevent it from falling. And so the three are, I translate sakina as self-clarity. I translate rahma as mercy or harmony. And I'll translate mawadda as love or shared clarity. More, I think, marital terms, if we can do so. And if you'll see at the intersection of self-clarity, there's mindset and well-being. Mindset is how we think about the marriage itself, and well-being is how healthy are we as an individual. And then at the intersection of at the intersection for harmony or rahma, there's readiness and well-being. Again, how healthy are we as individuals? And readiness, are we ready for this step? And readiness means different things for different stages. For someone single, are you ready to get married? For someone who is struggling, are you ready to make a decision how you want to proceed? And at the intersection of shared clarity is mindset and readiness. And then you'll see there's 9 separate sections total outside the outer edges. So mindset, there are beliefs, expectations. Number 2, cultural and family scripts. And number 3, an athena mindset. A question, rhetorical, but you can, if someone wants to shout it out, you can. What do you think plays a bigger role in marriage? Islam or culture? Islam should play the biggest role, but when you look at what actually happens on the ground, culture plays the biggest role, and it's not even close. Culture plays the biggest role. And I mention this because if you want to marry someone outside your culture, we as Muslims support that 1000%. And there's also a learning curve that has to be acknowledged, right? There has to be an acknowledgement there's a learning curve, and I'll talk more about this. For individual, there's well-being, communication repair, and differentiation, some technical terms, and readiness. There's roles, responsibilities, financial partnership, and literacy. And in the workshop, I'm going to go over 3 of these modules total because not enough time. But I think 3 things here. But this is the program that I take couples through, or even single people through. But I'll present 3 summarized versions here, which I think will give the most information. I think that'll help, inshallah. So under mindset, there's beliefs and expectations. So there's a very interesting hadith in Sahih Muslim. I'll just read the English for the sake of time. Iblis, shaitan, places his throne upon the water, then sends out his detachments. He has like little minions. Says, you go cause mischief here and you do it here, right? He'll send them out. And then the closest to shaitan is the one who causes the most trouble. So then they come back, one of them comes and says, I did this and this and this. And the hadith is actually much longer. There's like a whole list. The shayateen say, I did this, I did that, I did this. And shaitan is like, whatever, this, whatever. And then one of the shayateen comes and says to him, I separated a husband from his wife. And shaitan comes down and embraces this shaitan. Iblis comes down and embraces and says, you have done well. It's a weird like image inside Muslim because it's kind of like shaitan is showing compassion. What's happening here? It's a very weird image, but it's a very important hadith. Why? People are saying, give us a hadith about, love and everything. Why are you bringing this morbid hadith? Because one thing we can agree upon is that shaitan is aduwwun mubin. He is the clear enemy. And your clear enemy and my clear enemy, both of our clear enemies, he cares about the institution of marriage. If your enemy wants to destroy marriages, that means he sees something of value in them to begin with. And what I'm trying to do is I want to raise the awareness of how serious this institution is first. Sometimes the way we talk about this institution almost comes off as if it's a hobby more than it is a real institution. The way we find someone, the way we get married, the way we try to prepare for it, it's more nonchalant than it is with deep intention. If I ask someone, go study, right, and spend all this money and time at the university and do this, and Muslims in general, they'll put out all their investments in. When it comes to marriage, it's like, oh, we'll just figure it out. And that kind of mentality, you're facing it against shaitan who wants to destroy it. So I think the first thing I would say is we have to raise the level of awareness. Why? If you look at the other faiths, okay, the Christians in particular, they have done a lot of research on marriage. For example, through the program, I'm a citizen facilitator. It's a very long assessment, and it's detailed and it's data driven, and it's a Christian organization that does it. They even have like, oh, are you Muslim inside the assessment? The Christians are leading that, for example. Has anyone here heard of John Gottman by chance? The Gottman method is a very famous method, famous book. He's of the Jewish faith. Where is the Muslim-led institution research for when it comes to marriage? It is oftentimes just here are verses and here are hadith, which is good. But where's the framework? Where's the structure? Where's the improvement? Where's the transformation? So I think one thing we all have to recognize is that across the United States and across all the world, we're probably a decade to 2 decades behind other faiths in how they approach marriage as just people. And I think this is something to keep in mind as well, that we need to get more serious about this, inshallah ta'ala. If you can go to the next, okay. You can click. That was the hadith there. It goes to the next, yeah, okay. So one of the places to start in mindset is to know where you are in your mindset. So I'll address two different groups here. Just a raise your hand. Who here is single? Raise your hand. Okay. Who here is married? Raise your hand. Okay, so about 25% single. I don't know the women's section, but and then 75% married. I'm assuming it's closer to 50-50, something around there. I went to Connecticut the other day, like a month and a half, 2 months ago, and I hung out with some of the brothers after the talk, and the brothers were complaining, I can't find anyone to marry. And I said, there were like 15 guys who raised their hand that they were single, and there was like 20 girls who raised their hand they were single. And I'm like, there's a gap, right? Like there is an opportunity to get married there as well. So this here is the 5 stages of contemplation. So I'll address the single people here first, okay? One of this framework here, I think is a great framework to know where you're at and where you want to be. The 5 stages of contemplation for single people would be pre-contemplation, which is I'm fine being single. I'll just let it happen when it'll go at its own pace. Number 2, contemplation. Someone starts saying, I want to marry, but I'm hesitant to act. Number 3, I'm getting ready for marriage, but with intention. Number 4, I'm actively searching, which is action. And number 5, engagement, like we're moving and we found someone. Okay, why is this very important? This is very important for, I would say, 2 main scenarios. Scenario number 1, which is how young people talk to their parents and how parents talk to their kids. Okay. Oftentimes, what I see is that the kids and the parents sometimes are on different spectrums. So I have a client, okay, Pakistani male. He wanted to marry a Palestinian woman, okay, and they got along. He was going through the process. He kind of was handling it with her dad because in Palestinian culture, you go to the father, get the permission, X, Y, and Z. So he went through the whole process. He got the permission. He was ready to marry her. He goes to his mom, tells her about it. She had a heart attack. Literally. Goes to the ER. She almost died. Yeah, she almost died. So we said, yeah, we should pause this for a second. We don't want anyone dying from this process. Now, we've been working for almost a year and they're in a much better place. Their relationship is much better. But what happened when we were reflecting? What happened at that moment? What happened at that moment was her son was already at stage 5. And she was stage 1 pre-contemplation, not even thinking he was ready to get married. So when you have someone who's speaking from 2, 3, or 4 stages away, it causes a lot of stress, miscommunication, and obviously visceral reactions. So when parents are talking, if you're a parent and you're at stage 4, like action, let's go, it's fine, and your child is at 1, your job as a parent is not to get them to stage 4. Your job as a parent is to get them where? Stage 2. Get them to start thinking about it more, not take action. That takes patience. But we can't view things as binary. They're married or not married. We have to look at it from these 5 stages. And also vice versa. If you are someone young, right, who wants to get married and you found someone and your parents are kind of still getting along and you're 4 and they're 1, you have to do the same thing as well. Slowly bring them on board. And that was one of the things I was talking to this guy about, is that you went from 1 to 5 and she had a heart attack. You should have gone from 1 to 2 and she might have given you a fight or disagreed with you. So this framework is very good. And the other scenario that's very important is if you're looking for someone. When someone is trying to talk to somebody and trying to figure out if they're the right match, what the number one question I tell people to ask other candidates is, it's not about compatibility. It's not about your dean. I'll talk about all these things. It's about your timeline. You want to first gauge where they are in these 5 stages. Because if you're in action and you're ready to get married within 3 months, and this person's in pre-contemplation, right? You might have all the compatibility in the world. You might see eye to eye, your families like each other. But if they're pre-contemplation, your action is going to get delayed. And we've seen scenarios where it's a year or 2 years, right? So this is very important in terms of giving a framework. If we go to the next one, for couples though who are in a relationship that are kind of having some difficulties, you can also apply this. And by the way, you can apply this 5 stages of contemplation at work, with your own progress. You can do it in so many different ways. But for example, with a couple, pre-contemplation, they get into an argument. Say, it's not that. Contemplation, starting to see we have some issues. I'm ambivalent. 3, preparation, we need to start trying to prepare. So couples usually will start to prepare, repair, whatever it may be. Number 4, we're now actively preparing. We're trying to get resources help. And number 5, we need to figure out which direction we're going. Right. So a lot of times, for example, at the program that I do, it's a 12-week program. The first 8 weeks is just getting to clarity about which direction we're moving towards. It's actually going through these 5 stages of thinking. This I would ask yourself right now, if you're single, I would ask yourself right now internally, where are you in these 5 stages right now? And then ask yourself what it takes to get to the next stage. Or if you have a child, someone else you're thinking of, where are they? And what would it take for them to get to the next stage? Okay. Good so far? So this is right now just setting the stage for mindset. Now, in the Arabic language, so the ulama mentioned sometimes the fastest way to understand something is through its opposite. So if you go through an Arabic dictionary and they would define tawil, tall, they would say what? It's not qasir, not short. So for example, how would you define hot? Not cold. How would you define daytime? Not night. This is actually one of the fastest ways to define something. I find this method to be the best method also of defining a spouse. Instead of saying who a spouse is, I think the better question is, who is your spouse not? And then your spouse can be everything else. So number 1, your spouse is not your therapist. Any thoughts what I mean by that? When I say your spouse is not your therapist, what does that mean to anyone here?
They're not there to just all your baggage.
Okay, so the brother mentioned not dealing with all the baggage, right? And I think this is very important. The spouse is meant to act as a supporter to help the other spouse get to their goal, but they can't solve it 100%. Right? So your spouse is your companion supporter, but they're not your quote unquote therapist. Meaning that if you're coming into a marriage for the first time and you have all this baggage, all this childhood trauma, all these issues, right? It's not fair to expect that your spouse is going to solve them. We have to solve them. And this is the theme of the whole talk, by the way. If there's one thing you can take away from this talk, it's what are you in control of only? Yeah. What's the only thing we're in control of? ourselves. You can't control your spouse. You can work together, you can negotiate, but you can't control them. You're only control of yourself. Your spouse is not your parent. Sometimes there's what we call like enmeshment, where um, sometimes you get married and then there's like, oh, I didn't know I married a 2-for-1 here, like a package deal, right? So that was interesting, like a package, right? Like, so sometimes we have expectations that my husband will be like my father or my wife will be like my mother, right? And it's kind of like, well, no, they're your spouse, not your parent. Different relationship. Your spouse is not your savior. Look at Nuh alayhi salam. Nuh alayhi salam was a prophet. Could he save his wife when the flood came? So sometimes we say, oh, this brother or sister is not very practicing. Let's just throw them with someone who's practicing. It'll work out. Have we heard that and seen that before? Like, they're not your savior. Like, we have to still be held accountable individually with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not your competitor, right? They're your collaborator. And most importantly, which is important, they're not your everything. You know, when you compare the relationship with your spouse and your children, I saw this interesting TikTok. This this dad was recording his son, and the son asked his dad, "Dad, would you save my life? Like, would you sacrifice yourself to save my life?" And the dad was like, "Of course, you're his son. I sacrificed my life for you." I said, "Okay, who would you choose, me or mom?" And his dad said, "Mom, of course." He's like, "You just told me that you would sacrifice your life for me, and now you're choosing mom over me." And he's like, "Why would you say that? That doesn't make any sense." He said, "Because you're going to grow up and you're going to leave the house, find someone to start your own family, and who's going to be with me at that time? There's going to be your mom, not you, right?" And so the spousal relationship is such an interesting one because on one end, it is the most important relationship that you're going to have throughout the majority of your life. And on the other end, it's so sensitive because a relationship by blood, like if I have a son or a daughter, or if you have children, or you're a parent, nobody can break that bond. Even if you leave the house angry, don't talk. Guess what? That's still your father, that's still your mother, that's still your son, that's still your daughter. You can't break that. But if with the spouse, you can go from being best friends, talking every day, working together, to being non-violent the next week, where you can't be in the same space together without some type of violent person there. That's how quick it can shift. So this relationship is so important because it needs continuous watering at all times, right? And one of the biggest difficulties, I just had a couple this morning, and one of the biggest difficulties they were facing is that they couldn't make time for the marriage. There's always errands, there was kids, there was work, there was school. And I was saying, where is there time for the two of you? And they said, you don't make time for us. And that's actually one of the things that if you're a couple here, one of the questions is, when is there intentional time between you and your spouse? Not coincidental time, intentional time. I have a couple I've seen. They had a quote unquote halal date night for 20 years straight every week, whether on Zoom or in person. They made sure every Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. it was there. That's prioritizing that relationship. It's not neglecting other relationships, but one of the things that we have to do is we have to intentionally insert our marriage into our lives. Because if you don't intentionally make plans for that, then it's not going to happen because life's so busy. Life is so busy, right? And so one of the ways to do this and to change the mindset is to reframe negative thoughts, right? Um, Amazing is the fear of the believer. Truly, all of their affairs are good. and that is from no one except the believer. If something pleasant befalls them, they are grateful, and that is good for them. And if the hardship befalls them, they are patient, and that is good for them. This hadith is so important because your mindset leads to reality. How do we know this? The famous, oh yeah, sorry, the next, sorry about that. Okay, the next, oh, perfect. Yeah, oh, nice. I'm doing it. Move it down. Okay, the hadith, as I mentioned, the hadith, the khutbah, uh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions to the prophetic hadith, "Ana indi dhanni abdi bi," I am as my servant thinks of me. This is so important. Why? This hadith, because the way you think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala affects your reality. I'll give you an example. If you commit a sin and you believe that Allah is all forgiven, are you motivated to seek forgiveness? Yes, because you think you believe He is all forgiven. And the more times you seek forgiveness, will you not be forgiven more? Of course. So then your belief of Allah has affected your reality. But if you believe Allah is a Lord who will not forgive you, right? He will not forgive you. He will not overlook. Will you be as motivated to seek forgiveness? You will not be as motivated. And the less times we seek forgiveness, the less opportunities we have, it's affected your reality. Why do I mention this? The way you view your marriage will affect its reality. If you're a hesitant person and always looking and scanning for things to go wrong, things to go bad, guess what will happen? What do you think will happen if you're always scanning for things to go bad? Things will go bad because you're looking for it. If like when you entered into this room, right? Did anybody notice where the exit sign was? If you stared at the exit sign, stood by the exit sign, what are you eventually going to do? You're going to exit. If you're already thinking the marriage is not going to work, things are going to be bad, we're going to get into a fight, X, Y, and Z, you are more likely to get there. That's why they say that the number one mindset you need in marriage is a resolute mindset. This is actually the mindset our older generations had. Now, obviously, older generations, the marriages there were many issues with the older generation. They had different issues than we do today. But the one positive thing that they had is they had a resolute mindset. When you're married to me, you're dying with me. That's it. There's no second option here, right? That's it. And that mindset is what got them through the difficult moments. What's happening, the shift that I'm seeing with younger couples is that they're viewing their relationships more as disposable relationships, right? It's not as resolute. The second I had a couple, they got into some fight, young couple, like early 20s. They got into a fight. And then they said, and the wife said, I can't do this anymore. If this is how marriage is going to be, I'm not doing this anymore. And I said, you both are healthy. You don't have any children. There's no debt. It's going to get worse. It's going to get harder. I was like, there's a misunderstanding here, right? There's a misunderstanding at this point that marriage is going to test you in ways that you did not expect. And for those who've been married a long time here, you understand that there are many stressors in life. One argument and we're done. So the resilience tolerance has decreased because the mindset has changed. And the mindset has to go back to that marriage is not about the other person. Oh, yes, and that's just done. Right? Because people think marriage is all about finding the right person. I have to find the right person. But that mentality is wrong. Marriage is an institution that provides these three values that forces you to grow in ways which you not grow otherwise. Has anyone ever met someone who was single like for a long, long time and someone married, right? There is a big difference. Like the mentality changes because marriage forces you to adapt to different circumstances than if you were not married, right? And it's very important that if you understand this, then you'll say it's not about the other person, it's stop searching for a spouse and start preparing to be the one you want to marry. I can't tell you how many times people want to marry someone who they themselves have not met that criteria. I want to marry this person. I want to be with this person. And then I ask them, are you that person? And they're like, not yet. And I'm like, well, there is a big gap there. That's a massive gap. We have to first be aligned with ourselves before we can find someone else. And if you get to that point, what ends up happening naturally is you find someone like that as well. Oftentimes, the lack of finding someone is not about finding someone, it's about there's a lack of internal growth that needs to be done. So that's the mindset, and that's the mindset summary there. Any questions about mindset first before I go on to the next part? And the reason why I bring up mindset is because it doesn't matter how much communication, how much repair, how many tools you have. If you have the wrong mindset, no amount of tools is going to help you. Because the mindset is the engine that's pushing all the problems. It's mindset. Okay. Let's go to the next slide, which is well-being. Okay. The self-concept. Self-concept is who am I and do I like who I am? And it's really the gap between your real self and your ideal self. Okay. It's foundational to the emotional health, relationship fulfillment, and long-term marital satisfaction. Okay. So there's congruency. I'm going to use Western language. I'm going to use also Quranic language. Okay. I'll first use Western and I'll go to Quranic language. This is Carl Jung language for those familiar with Carl Jung. So this is his kind of terminology that he uses, incongruency and congruency. So incongruency is when you have your own self-image and you have your ideal self and they are incongruent. They are far apart. Okay. Um, and essentially there is self-actualization will become difficult. There's even delusion. Someone is delusional about where they are. So sometimes I'll talk to someone and they're here and they want to marry someone here, whatever that means. I'm not saying what it means exactly, but there's a gap. And I can't find anybody because they think they're here when they're really here. And they're comparing everyone to their ideal self, not who they really are. Right? There's incongruency and it appears in many different ways. And I'll show you an activity that you can do. Congruency is when your self image and your ideal image are not exactly the same, but your self image is just far enough where you know you have to improve, but you're still aware of who you are at the same time. Because we all want to improve, right? So we don't want to be exact. In Quranic language, this kind of sounds more like nafs al mutma'inna, is more congruency, where our soul right now in this dunya versus our soul when we enter Jannah, inshallah ta'ala, that congruency is nafs al mutma'inna, the soul is content. And incongruency is more nafs al amara bisu, as mentioned in Surah Yusuf, where you have your internal self pushing for your desires versus what is pleasing to Allah. It's really your own desires versus what's pleasing to Allah. If your desires are not congruent with Allah's pleasure, incongruencies. If your desires and what you do is congruent with Allah's pleasure, you get to nafs al-mutma'inna. So there is that element as well that we can think of. Here's a nice exercise that I have people do to see where there's incongruency or not. This is called the Johari window model. I love this. The couple I worked with this morning just did it, and it was an amazing session because there were so many insights. There are 4 quadrants here. The first column is things that you know about yourself. The second column are things that you don't know about yourself. The first row are things that others know about you, and the second row are things that others don't know about you. So you end up with 4 quadrants. Okay. The top left quadrant is the open internet, public knowledge. So, مثلا, for example, my name is Faraz. I'm a male, right? I'm married. I have two kids. Like, this is public knowledge now. I can put that into that bucket. Or, for example, you can talk about characteristics. Maybe you can say, I don't know, anything, right? Then there are things that are blind spot, things that you know about yourself, but others know about you. And someone says, wait, how is that possible? How do people know something about me, which I don't know about myself? It is very possible. Your teachers, your parents, your colleagues, they might see things in you which you have not been self-aware of. Then on the bottom left, there are things that you know about yourself and others will know about you, which you're hiding. And the bottom right, which I love the most actually, is an unknown territory where there's a lot of growth. So I'll give you, if you see here, what we want to do to gain congruency is we want to increase the top left quadrant and decrease our blind spot first. You need a blind spot monitor in your life. You know how you drive the car and it flashes? You you need that in your life, otherwise you're going to get into an accident in life. Now, how do you get that? You get that through feedback from your mentors, from your teachers, from your family, from your friends, from your colleagues, from your. By the way, when I do this activity, do you know who gives the best feedback? Anyone? Any ideas? Spouse? Your spouse is nice. Spouse not gonna say anything. Your spouse is not gonna give you the true feedback. they'll, they'll be like, well, you could kind of, who do you think gives the most brutal advice?
Siblings.
Yeah, it's your siblings. You know the most interesting relationship I find is the sibling relationship, because the sibling relationship is the longest lasting relationship actually. With your kids, right? Eventually, we pray that we die before our kids. We don't ever want our children to pass away before us, but we will pass away before our children, right? So we don't see how they grow old and everything. And then, when it comes to our parents, right? They pass away before us usually. But your siblings, they see you in every stage. They're growing with you at every stage. They're like, I know who you were. I know who you are. I know who you're trying to become. I know all three, and they'll give you advice and feedback. So I've actually had one session where they got their siblings' advice, and it actually caused a lot of issues. We had a whole session of calming them down because it was too raw. The feedback was too raw to take, but they give really good advice if you really want some feedback. Um, and so let me give you an example of and this person gave me permission to share their activity here. So they took about, and you can do this also. You can do this at your own time. You can go to ChatGPT. ChatGPT, pick 50 adjectives that would describe something in general. Okay, and and then send these 50 adjectives to someone and tell them to pick from these 50 adjectives to describe who you are. Okay, and then essentially this person did that, and they asked five people. So you'll see in the top left, this individual described himself as intelligent, trustworthy, organized, self-assertive, and wise. Five people in the parentheses said, we agree you're intelligent. Four people said, we think you're trustworthy. Three people said you're organized. Two self-assertive, and two said wise. Look at the bottom left. No one said this person was caring, even though they viewed themselves as caring. So we had a conversation. Well, that's interesting. Is it that you think you're caring? Why do you think you're caring? And where do you think the gap is when no one's saying that you're caring? It may be that other people think that. It might be the case, but it may be something else also. So we talked about that. But look at the top right. Look how big of a blind spot they had. Massive blind spot. Knowledgeable, independent, able, logical, calm, dependable, sensible, kind, confident, friendly, introverted, responsive, helpful, energetic, patient, quiet, empathetic, cheerful, observant, warm. A huge blind spot, meaning that this is a sign of incongruency. This is too big of a blind spot. It's okay to have some blind spot, but it can't be that big where it's bigger than other aspects of your life. So this exposed that we had to dig through this. Today I had a couple, and they both had the same characteristic in their blind spot, which was passive aggressive. They were both described as passive aggressive. I said, that's interesting. They both like, no, we're not passive aggressive. You know, and I was like, okay, well, everyone else is saying you guys are. So, you know, that's an interesting thing to think about. And we talked about these things. So this is an activity that you can do to kind of gauge yourself. And the bottom right are other adjectives that we have not explored yet. So this could be an exploration field, like how do I explore this part of my life, right? So this is something to gain some sense of congruency where I'm at. So everyone, I think this is a good yearly activity. This activity I think should be done on a yearly basis. And you should ask people, not all in the same domain. Should be from family, from work, from friends, people who are not Muslim also, and see what they have to say. Okay. The other aspect of being a healthy individual is the aspect of forgiveness. And last time I came to Ummah Center, I gave the khutbah about Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and his path towards forgiveness. And forgiveness is what, right? Forgiveness is not forgetting, it's not excusing, it's not justifying, it's not selfishness, and also it's not an obligation. Forgiveness is very important. And let me tie it from the values actually. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned three values, right? Sakina, mawadda, and rahma. Of the three values in marriage, I would argue rahma is the most important value of all three. Not even love, and not even the tranquility part. It's the rahma. And I'll tell you, rahma is a mindset more than it is being kind. Okay. With love, with any relationship, there's love and there's also hurt. They come in a package. You can't separate love and hurt. They come together. If you are only operating from a point of love, anytime you get hurt, you're going to weaponize this hurt against yourself or the other person. This is very important to understand. You feel hurt, and then someone takes that hurt and they process it one of two ways, which are both unhealthy. They start self-blaming and self-criticizing. They over self-blame, over self-criticize, or they over self-criticize their partner because they're not processing. And it's just a reaction. If you get hurt, what's someone's natural reaction when they get hurt? Generally speaking, they're not even thinking at all. There's no restraints. When someone gets hurt, what's the natural reaction someone does? If someone hits you, what's the natural reaction? Defend himself, yeah. You go defensive or you hit them back. Right? And that makes sense. But mercy is very different. Mercy says a very different question. Mercy is, I know I'm hurt, but I'm going to internalize this. I'm going to process it. I'm not going to weaponize it. This is so important because this is the equation that will help marriages get to the finish line. Love is great when things are great. But when things are not great, love is great. It's mercy that kicks in. But the mercy will not kick in unless you understand the idea of forgiveness. This idea of forgiveness is very important in Islam because it's not tied to your partner as much as it's tied to your relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you see this triangle here, okay, this little model of forgiveness, there is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at top, and there is the husband and wife at bottom. The closer the husband and wife are to each other, to Allah, the closer they are to Allah. I apologize. The closer they are to Allah, the closer they are to each other. You see how it goes? If the couple is here and Allah's up here and they go closer to Allah, what happens? They get closer to each other. If one person goes far away from Allah, what happens? Right? They get further away. If both go far away from Allah, what happens? They both get further away. The idea of forgiveness is not so much about forgiving the other person. I had a couple, okay? I was dealing with them. Second marriage, both of them. And the husband did something that was very hurtful to the wife. And so she was saying to me, we need to have a conversation about that incident and I need repair. So I said, okay, we'll have it. We get into the conversation and he starts shutting down in the middle of the conversation. He just starts shutting down. That's his normal withdrawal behavior. So instead of doing that, I kind of just worked through his process. He broke down crying in the middle, which is very courageous of him to do. Broke down crying. But when he broke down crying, in the middle of him processing everything, he said, like, I'm really sorry for everything I did to her. I had an individual session with her and she said, that's all the repair I need. That's all I need. I don't need to talk about everything that happened. Just the fact that he had real remorse, that's all I needed. Right? I mention this because forgiveness is not the idea of the other person, it's an internal process. Forgiveness is more of an internal process than it is an external process. It's not about the other person, it never has been. It's about how we react to those scenarios and how that reflects our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we look at what happened with this person, we have to ask ourselves, how many times have I done something wrong with Allah and how many times has He overlooked that? I want to take that and bring it to my relationship. And that is the epitome of rahmah, right? And I think this is probably the most important skill to learn. And the way you learn this skill is going to be through um, mercy, through empathy, which leads me to the last topic here for tonight, which is going to be communication and repair. Okay. The way to understand communication and repair is to first, again, have a different mindset about argumentation. Gottman mentions there is no evidence that argumentation indicates a bad marriage. Everybody fights. Everyone fights. That's normal. Okay. In the Japanese culture, there's, has anyone ever heard of kintsugi before? It's a very interesting Japanese art culture where essentially they take broken items and they repair them with gold. So you can look it up online, like beautiful plates, beautiful cups, and they'll break and then they will solidify it with gold. And it has like its own beautiful nature. And ironically, the materials become stronger because of it. That is exactly what marriage is. If there's one picture of marriage, it would be this one. Everyone has their separate cracks. Everyone has their individual issues. But if you know how to repair it, it's your own and only becomes strong. So reframing communication is very important first and foremost because you lean into the argument, not away from it. A lot of couples will lean away from argumentation. They will lean away from pain. You know, also about pain, I have some couples who get at the brink. Like we are at the brink of divorcing or staying together. We're not sure what to do. And I would say, okay, so tell me what it would take to stay in the marriage. And they would say, it's extremely painful to stay in a marriage. And I'll say, okay, what would divorce look like? It would be extremely painful. My kids would suffer, everyone would suffer. And I'm like, so where are you? It's like, I don't know. I'm in between. I said, it's not that you're trying to make a decision to stay or getting divorced. It's that you're trying to avoid pain. What you're really doing is avoiding pain. But either direction you go, there's going to be pain. So the first step is not making a decision. The first step is to go through the pain and process and see where that ends. And that's scary. And so this whole idea is we need to lean into this, not lean away from it. And that leaning, that repositioning is probably the most important part first, before you even go any moving forward. When it comes to communication, I made this little analogy of like an airplane analogy for communication. There are three stages of communication. There's takeoff, cruise, and landing. Okay. So you'll have argumentations appear at different stages. Okay. Some conflicts appear, the kind of conflicts that appear at the takeoff stage when you start a conversation. Number one, harsh startup. Hey, what happened this past time was not okay. And they're like cleaning dishes. Like, okay, like, can we like get it? Can we have an introduction? It's like asking an airplane just to get into the air. Like, there's no runway, just get into the air. Relationships are not helicopters. They are airplanes. They need runways. Right? Bad timing. Getting into a fight before a wedding. Getting into a fight before family comes. Getting into a fight before you have to give a big presentation. Getting into a fight at midnight at bed, it goes till 4 a.m. And like, why am I so tired? Because we're fighting all night. Where did the time go? Timing is so important. I can't tell you how far it goes when you say, if you just said, can we just schedule the fight for 10 a.m.? Can we just schedule it? Like, we know we're going to fight. It's okay. Can we just schedule it so it's a better timing? Because sometimes you can't avoid it, by the way, but you can reschedule it. Sure. Um, there's kitchen sinking. Kitchen sinking is when you are trying to solve too many problems at once. It never works fine. Solving 2, 3, 4 problems in one conversation never works. One at a time. I had a couple who, stepfather, stepmother, they had many children, and the children were kind of getting into argumentation with each other, and the parents were being sucked into it. And so one of the children went to went inside the iPad of another child, like privacy violation, read through texts about what they said about the other kid. They got into a huge fight, right? And so there were two issues happening at once. There was the privacy violation, and then there was also the issue of what the person said. And they were trying to talk about both scenarios at the same time. It's very important when you have so many multiple issues that you handle them one at a time. You can't handle two issues at one conversation. So stay focused. Forced opening, we'll talk about that in a second. The second stage is cruise. Okay. There's escalation. There's lost signal. Fixing too soon. Husbands do this more often. They try to fix the problem too soon versus reflecting the emotion. We'll talk about what that means. Defensiveness, criticism. Gottman mentions the four horsemen. If you've ever heard of it, the four horsemen are indicators of a marriage deteriorating very quickly and leading toward divorce, which is criticism. Criticism is you're attacking someone's character as opposed to attacking the issue at hand. Where it's like, for example, you didn't clean the dishes versus you're so dirty. Like criticism is one. Contempt, stonewalling, where you shut down, and flooding, the emotion just comes out. These are some things as well. And then in the landing part, there's sweeping under the rug, right? There is, I can't even read that now. Uh, oh, you're leaving at the end of the conversation. There's a lack of closure and also re-entering the fight. These are some ways how there's a crash landing. Okay. Some antidotes here. So I'll just read them off and then I'll give you one final activity to do where I think it can help a lot. But take off, you can have a gentle startup. You can ask to talk about something. You can talk about one thing at a time and right timing. Cruising, right? You want to reflect. Okay. Also, some other things I see that I think are very important. is that limit your conversations to 30 minutes to an hour. Put a timer on. Don't let them go on forever. You're not, and 99% of conversations and arguments, by the way, with couples never get solved. So the goal is never to solve the argument. The goal is to create a space for both partners to feel like they're being heard. Very important. We don't solve problems in a marriage. We work through them together. Two very different mindsets there. So we're not trying to get to a destination. The process is the destination itself. And the reason why, and this is so important, the one skill, if you had to take away, is the skill of reflecting. And the skill of reflecting is, so there's a big difference between empathy and sympathy. Everyone know the difference between empathy and sympathy? Okay, can someone shout out, what is sympathy?
Feel bad about something something happened to something.
The brother doesn't feel bad, right? To match the emotion, essentially, to match someone's emotion. If someone is sad, like, oh my gosh, you're so sad. That's not sympathy. Sympathy, like, oh man, you're so sad. What is empathy then? Say it again. Going through the same feelings. Like you understand how the person is feeling. You're thinking of their feelings, not your own at that moment. This is a very difficult skill, but empathy is a very difficult skill. The best way to show empathy is through reflection. Reflection is you are just reflecting back the emotion. Okay. And so when I've done this with couples, it takes usually the husband 7 to 9 reflections before the wife has an opening. And it takes usually the wife 3 to 5 reflections before the husband has an opening. It's interesting. Just wives need more reflection and husband needs less. And that's how Allah created human beings, by the way. It's not a good or bad thing. It is what it is. Also, it's actually beautiful. The point is, how do you do this? I'll give an example, and you can reflect on anything. Okay, like for example, I'll look at this. I'll look at the wall. You're feeling very pale today. Like I'm talking, I can reflect on anything. You're feeling very pale today. You're very white. You're very cold. You feel alone. So I'll give you an example of a conversation I've heard. Okay, one of the spouses comes and says, "You came late again today from work. You're never home on time for dinner." A spouse who responds would usually say, "Well, work's so busy and I can't get out and I don't know what to do, and that's just how it is, and that's the situation I'm in." That's not reflecting, that's responding, which is what most people do. Reflecting would be, you miss my presence at home and you're feeling alone. You see the big difference there? I'm not trying to respond to the content, I'm trying to respond and reflect the emotion. Yeah, I'm alone because I'm home all alone for these many hours. And when you're not here, things become stressful. Oh, you're feeling very overwhelmed and it's hard to juggle all those feelings. Yes. And it's not fair that I have to do all these things by myself. You feel like you don't have support. Yeah, I don't have support and I need more support. You don't feel like I'm here supporting you at the moment and you need my support. Yes, I need your support. You see, that's an opening, for example. That just comes up. But you would never get to that opening if you respond by saying, "I got so busy at work." What's going to happen if you say that? How's your spouse going to respond? They might even shut down, to be honest. They might not say anything. They might shut down. Here we go again. Another excuse. You don't have to solve the problem of your work. You have to reflect the feeling. And for husbands, it's hard because we're so wired as men to just solve problems over and over and over again, which is a good thing, by the way. But we're so hardwired to solve problems that we're trying to solve their feelings, our wife's feelings. When your wife's feelings don't need to be solved, they need to be reflected, right? And similarly, and by the way, like I know this is a lot of the times like with wives, but also husbands, by the way, wives need to have emotions as well, right? Men are also human beings that have emotions, and so reflecting is also very important as well on the opposite end. But if you can reflect, and by the way, when you reflect, one partner should be the one who's just talking, and the other one should be full reflecting until they feel like they've been heard. I can't tell you how easy it is. All you have to say is, you feel, you feel, you feel, you feel, you feel, you feel. That's all you have to say. But you have to keep picking emotion. It's like playing dart with a dartboard. You throw it, you didn't get the bullseye. And they'll tell you, by the way, no, that's not it. You throw it again. You throw it again. But when you get the emotion right and you get it right at the bullseye, things will. That's what I do on like a daily basis when I work with clients. I'm reflecting by it. And when I hit the emotion, that's when people have this moment of this catharsis and they're crying and things come out because I hit the emotion. If you do that with your spouse, you'll have great communication. And by the way, this works well, with other aspects of life as well. So reflect, reflect, reflect. And when you see the opening, clarify, and also, this is very important, soothe that feeling, give reassurance. I'm here to support you. I'm here, and I'm going to support you, and you're not alone. Close, because when you open the emotion, it's like almost like a wound opens. You want to close it with reassurance, and you can close some of those cycles doing that way. So that's the end of the presentation, and there's so much information I can give. There's like I have like 30 hours of information I can give, but I'm trying to condense everything into one quick session, one quick workshop here that can give the mindset, the beliefs, the mindset, the self, well-being, and also the communication tool. I think with these things, it can be a great first step, inshallah ta'ala. You can join a newsletter. If you are, I do write some things on my Substack. My khutbahs and my thoughts are on Substack. So if you want to follow it, you can do that as well. All my khutbahs are written word for word there. So if people ask me where can I read the khutbahs, they're all on my Substack there. You can scan that. And then if you're also someone who is interested in some of the services, you can book a call, inshallah, and have a clarity call to see if I can help, inshallah. So I think we have about maybe 15 minutes, right? So Q&A, I think, is appropriate here, right? All right, so I'll open the floor for questions, inshallah ta'ala. Yeah.
What about reconciliation? So many times we clients return that in such situations, reconciliations, reconciliation. It's something with spouses to stay.
Yeah, wasul khair, right? Reconciliation is better. I think, what's very important is that when you get help from a non-Muslim versus a Muslim, there are two very, very different dynamics. If you go to like a non-Muslim therapist, oftentimes they'll kind of push for divorce right away because they're like, oh, you're unhappy, leave. And that's their response. The Islamic paradigm is very different. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, Rasul mentions in the hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most hateful, lawful thing in Islam is divorce. It's not a sin, so we should not treat it as such. But Allah does not like it also, which means we should do everything in our power to avoid it as much as possible before we get to that decision. The, the other the other thing is very important is the way you end relationships is just as important as ending it. Sometimes people say, for example, well, it was inevitable. Fine if it's inevitable, but using all the resources at your hand is still very important because you still learn a lot in that process. You know, the statistics, the stats are clear. People who get divorced are twice as likely to get divorced again. Okay, it doesn't mean you're doomed, but what's happening? Part of it is that people just get divorced very quickly. They learn nothing from the process. They didn't learn what to do the second time. They just quickly made a decision and didn't try to reconcile. Even if the reconciliation doesn't work, the process of reconciliation is a learning process as well. Of how do I attempt to reconcile? And I actually think if people can't work in their marriage out, the way you exit a marriage, oftentimes I've seen, reflects the way sometimes you enter the second one. So we want, even if we can't survive this, we still want to do this in an amicable way, right? And so I think there's a lot of learning to do. I've had couples, literally, there's a couple I had with where the wife was saying in session, she was telling me this afterwards. She's like, I was thinking about this is done. This is done. Like, I'm divorced. And because I worked with her and had her stay resilient, she didn't say anything. That was the same session where the husband cried and she felt repaired. If you don't stay patient, you won't allow Allah's plan to kick in also. This is very important. Allah's plan is always a plan, but we don't know his timeline of his plan. You don't want to expedite your plan in front of Allah's plan. Staying patient allows Allah's work to also come in by the way. So we want to slow down and reconcile, not just for the sake of reconciliation, but there's a lot of hikmah and a lot of wisdom in even attempting to do so, despite how bad things can look and how bad things are. Obviously, as long as there's no clear red lines that have been crossed, which we can talk about in another session.
Thank you, Simon. As we call it Allah.
Yeah.
Stay cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, the closer we are to Allah, the closer we are to each other. Any other questions? I know there are. It just takes a little bit of courage. Also, the women's side, you can ask questions as well. I'll also answer on that side. Yeah.
I have a question in terms of parents wanting to pick the kid's spouses. And does the kid have the right to refuse the parents? And what are the
The question I understand is that the parents want to choose the spouse for their child. And does the child have a right to say no? The short answer is yes. There is no marriage that can exist without the consent of the one getting married. So first and foremost, right? But you know, I think again, it's the communication between the parent and the child that is more important here. Is that what it almost sounds like that five stages of thinking that the parents are so far ahead of the child and like action, 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 right? Um, and so I think there has to be more better communication between the two parties about maybe we can work together on this, right? I think also we have to have conversations about. So I was in I think the whole matchmaking scene is a very interesting scene. I'm not really a part of it, but from what I've heard from the couples I've worked with is that number one, some of the I don't know off topic, but I'll come around, I promise. Some of the apps that people use, uh, the majority of people are not happy with their experience when it comes to apps. That's what I've been hearing at least. And So they're wondering how do we find people. So I was in Columbus, I think in like December or November, and it was a singles event. And I think there must have been like 20 guys and like 30 women in a public space. And it was funny because we had a Q&A session and it was just the boys complaining about the girls and the girls complaining about the boys. It was hilarious. And one of the girls in the session, she said, "You guys are what did she say? You guys are weak. You guys are weak." And the guy said, "What did you just say? Like, yeah, you guys are weak because you don't approach us." And even say Salam Alaikum. Oh, that's interesting take. So I was like, okay. And so then, but the guys were like, well, you don't want us to approach you because you're with your friends, or that's not something that you feel comfortable with. So when we did the survey, I said, this is very interesting. So I said, okay, of the girls sitting there, how many of you would want the guy to approach your parents first? So half of them raised their hands. And I said, okay, how many of you would want someone to approach you directly in a halal way, like a public space, like saying, just say this line? Half of them raised their hands. So I went to the girls and I said, that's confusing for the guys. How are they supposed to know which girl they're dealing with? To go to the parent or go to the person directly? So the conclusion we came to in that conversation is that, so there's a lot to have, there's a lot of conversation about this space, but one of the principles in Islam is that a non-mahram man should not be in seclusion with a female. Okay, we call it khalwa in Arabic. Khalwa. There should not be any seclusion. Okay, but public spaces is not a seclusion. So if you're in an airport, right, you can have females with males. You're in an airport, right? We're in the masjid, females and males sharing the space, right? It's a public space. So this is not considered to be a secluded space. And the conclusion and my point to your conversation is that, like, I think what's really happening is that there isn't communication between the parent and child how to approach this, right? There needs to be a shared vision on how we even approach this topic, right? But one of the things I think also for people who are here is that going on an app and texting someone, in my personal opinion, is my opinion. Okay, that's seclusion. That to me is seclusion. If you're texting someone privately and you're not married, that's a secluded conversation. The apps are secluded by nature. I actually find to be more aligned with Islamic principles that you see someone at a coffee shop in public, or you're at like, you're at a library. If you're college students, right, and they're studying, and they say one person sits at a public tables of hundreds of people around them, and they have a simple conversation about class or something. This to me is not seclusion, right? So I think there has to also be education here about what the lines are. And people have different tolerance levels in Islam, right? Some people would be highly against what I'm saying now. Like that's not possible. There should be no communication at all. Okay, but then how do we address the marriage crisis also? Because that's also an issue as well. So I think there has to be a shared vision of how we even approach this conversation, right? And there needs to be coaching for young people as well, because a lot of the guys they feel like it's aib, it's bad to even say assalamu alaikum, to even say assalamu alaikum, right? The khutbah I gave, Aisha anha was alone in the story. If she was alone, and Safwan comes and says, "Assalamu alaikum." Like, there's nothing wrong in just giving the greeting of Islam. Now, if it leads beyond that, sure, but just saying, "Hi, my name is Faraz, and this X, Y, and Z," there's nothing inherently wrong with it in introduction, right? So I think this is important to understand as well. And so there is something that we have to do when it comes to this whole space. I don't. This is not my space. I don't work on it. I work with couples or people, or I coach single people to help get married. But I don't work in the matchmaking space, and that I think is a whole different arena, which I still think is being figured out. I don't think we've figured it out yet, to be honest. But what I have seen, the best way, in my personal opinion, of connecting two people together is just internal recommendations still. one family recommends another family. I still find this to be the best way. So sometimes I have like a list of like 40 people. I go to different communities and like I'm single, I'm single. I think it's far better if someone gives an introduction to two families. I still think this is the best way that I've seen. It's a transfer of trust versus going through all these public platforms and everything. I still think going through that method is the proven way that has given the best results still until today. A referral program, essentially. I know I gave a long-winded answer, so the answer is no. Okay, yeah,
Stages.
yeah.
Six on the lines, which they will add, what are the suggestions to for understanding how we get to the next stage?
So the first stage is pre-contemplation, so everyone starts there. The next stage, contemplation, I think it's just you start to internalize it more to see how old you are, where you are in life, where you want to be in life, what it might look like for a spouse to come into your life. I think that's just contemplating. I think the biggest shift would be going from contemplation to preparation. And I think that shift is number one, don't get advice on social media. The social media advice is probably the worst advice I've seen on marriage. I can't tell you how much bad advice there is on social media. And so many times I have a couple, I'm like, I have to debunk all the things they've heard on social media and get them back to square one. So don't, so in terms of preparation, you need to get solid advice. Don't ask single people about marriage. They don't know what they're talking about. Single people talk about marriage the most. So don't go to your friends who are single. Don't go to people who are single. If you want to get advice, ask people who have been married first and foremost, who have actually gone through it. Maybe someone who's not so much older than you, but maybe someone who's 5 to 10 years older than you, where you see yourself in 5 to 10 years, and say, hey, you're 5 to 10 years, your memory's fresh. What is it like for you? Like that blind spot, right? You need to get feedback, prepare. But I also think there needs to be professional advice as well. I mean, like I said, the advice out there is really poor advice, generally speaking. You should definitely get a mentor. You should definitely get someone who you can trust. And you should go through some type of book you read, program you go through, something that's real preparation. I think once you get to that place, then once preparation, the action is pretty simple, right? You're just meeting people through different avenues and you're taking action. And then it's a process of filtering it out about who you want to marry. And eventually you get to the point where you marry someone. But I think the biggest bottleneck is between 2 and 3 that I've seen. That's the biggest bottleneck. I hope that helps. Do you have a follow-up question for that, or is that helpful? Or um, I think if you've gotten like I have someone we've been working for like 6 months and they've gotten to the engagement phase 3 times and every time they got to the engagement phase it broke down. So that was someone who was like, yeah, this is not there's something persistent here that this is not a coincidence anymore. I would definitely say if you've gone down to the end point for like 2, 3 times and it's broken down every single time, then I would say it's time to start looking for a mentor for sure to like break something. There's something happening that we need to break at this point. But when it comes to marriage, I would try to fail fast when you're looking for someone. Fail quicker. Don't take longer to fail. People think success is in anything is to get to the goal, but you only get to the goal the faster you fail. What I mean is you want what I see with with single people when they talk together is that they take too long to talk and figure things out. Well, I have to feel, I have to figure this out. One of the things that I would do when you're talking to someone or families are talking is immediately from day one have a time. Okay, with stages. So We are figuring it out let's make this process a 3-month process. Right? The first month, let's just see if they like each other. But it should not take more than a month to figure that out. If they like each other, then let's go to the next stage, right? And use that month to see, let's talk and let's see with the families, this is a good fit. Another month. And then by the third month, let's plan to see if we can execute this, right? And you want to have check-ins. Otherwise, it'll become indefinite and it just keeps being dragged out, and dragged out. And what that does is it limits failure to a shorter time span. But if you have someone you've been trying to talk to for 6 months, for a year, right? And it doesn't work out, what's going to happen the second time you try to look for somebody? Oh, another 6 months to a year I have to do this? Another one? So I would actually try to fail faster. Don't try to find someone, try to get a no faster. The faster you get a no, the faster you'll get a yes. The more no's you go through, the faster you'll get a yes. So to actually lean into the no's, not away from them. So that's what I would say in terms of if I had to give any advice, I would lean into that. Just figure it out if it's a no. And a lot of guys that go through this process are also generally the women that I've seen, they're higher in the stages than the guys are, by the way. So unfortunately, what I've had to coach with some of the women is that I told some of the women, you might have to semi-coach the guy in the process to kind of get him to like, hey, like, are you serious about this? Can we do this, right? And it also happens vice versa, by the way. Sometimes the girl is not as serious as the guy is. I'm not saying it's only that way, but there needs to be someone leading the push. And that's what I recommend. Allah, Allah knows best. Is it Mother?
2 minutes.
Okay, one last question. Any last questions? Okay, we'll pause here. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted this gathering. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give the single people here righteous spouses. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heal our marriages and put barakah into our marriages. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow beautiful families to form from these beautiful marriages. Allahumma ameen. If you want to talk afterwards, I'll be free after Maghrib to talk one-on-one. But if you want to get any more questions answered, you can go to RoommatestoSoulmates.com. Jazakallah khair for the leadership and Ummah Center for having me. It's a beautiful community and praying for everyone here as well. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.